The Middle East Institute. I'm Wendy Chamberlain. I'm president of the Middle East Institute, and I'm happy to see so many of our loyal members out who've joined us this afternoon for a very special presentation. We are extremely fortunate to host, once again, Dr. Mona Makram-Ebeid. She is professor of political science at the American University of Cairo. She's a former Shura Council member. She's a Harvard Kennedy School graduate, and she's a woman who I admire tremendously. She's here to give us her first-hand account. She's come from Cairo. She's give us her first-hand account of the upheaval that we have all been reading about with great interest over the last months and years, but particularly this week. Dr. Makram-Ebeid has been on the front lines in Egypt. She was there as a key player during the overthrow of Mubarak. She was an advisor to the interim military government. She was very much a player during the entire period of the Muslim Brotherhood government, and now she's been very much involved in the toppling of President Morsi. She's a true political insider, having served as the only female as a Christian on the Shura Council. She was an advisor to the SCAF, and most recently a vocal supporter of the Tamarod movement. So you can see, she's a woman who really knows her stuff. She's someone who's been an influential player in all aspects of the very exciting and historical events in Egypt. The timing of today's event could not be better. As you know, it's been a pivotal week in Egypt and its transition process. Whether and how Egypt will rebound from the political, social, and economic turmoil that is destabilizing the country is anybody's guess. But if there's one person who can speak with authority on what's happening in Egypt, it's our guest speaker here today. So we're lucky to have her and to hear what she has to say from this accomplished expert, and particularly opportune moment in Egypt's history. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Mona Makram-Ebeid. For a full bio, please see the flyer that we've prepared for you and is on your chair. Thank you very much.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I am particularly pleased to be back at the Middle East Institute, which is my favorite think tank here, and I can't believe that you don't hear me. I can't believe it. So, and I want to really thank Ambassador Wendy Chamberlain and Kate Seeley for inviting me once again. I feel honored and privileged to be here with you, and I see many familiar faces, which I'm glad to see again. I hope you're as glad as I am to see me again. So, as Ambassador Wendy told you, I came to Washington a few days ago after having lived through the most exciting but terribly dangerous days of my political career. I had been in constant touch with the young people of Tamarud through my AUC students and other activists of the 2011 revolution. I was transfixed, I must say, by their courage, by their determination, and fascinated by the courage of these young people, particularly their young leader, Mahmoud Badr, whom I met several times. And like many of us, older generation, I was skeptical that they would be able to collect the 15 million signatures. But all the same, I duly signed the rebel petition for the ouster of Mr. Morsi. we had lived 3 decades of torpor under Mubarak, so it was difficult to see how people can be so energized and so courageous. So, and lo and behold, on the 30th of June, 30 million Egyptians, if not more, took to the streets to demand Mr. Morsi's resignation. Only in Tahrir Square, where I was, there were about 3 million Egyptians, filled with a sense of hope, especially when the army helicopters were flying all over us and dropped the Egyptian flag. And also when we saw the young policemen, all clad in white, arriving carried on people's shoulders, something that we haven't seen for a year or more since the revolution, because they were reviled and they had left the street, really. So this was the first sign not only of the police rebelliousness, but also of the solidarity with the people. That very morning, I was privy, on the 30th of June, I was privy to an urgent meeting at former Minister Kafrawi's house, and in the presence of Lewa Fuad Allam, for the Egyptians who are here, who was former deputy head of the security forces, and the well-known writer Saad Hagras, and 10 or 12 other people representing labor and peasant syndicates and so on. And we were all wondering why we were gathered there. And Minister Kafrawi told us that they had been in touch with the army, with the Pope, with the Sheikh al-Azhar, and with General Sisi. So the army had requested from them to have a written popular demand for them to intervene and prevent a disastrous bloodbath. So we drafted it very quickly because we had to give it in before 3 o'clock. And by phone, we got the approval of 50 other personalities. And such as Tahani Gibali, such as Gaber Nassar, the new head of the Cairo University, and many others of the same caliber, and we had it delivered to the armed forces before 3 o'clock. Part of the wording of the drafting said, you gave everyone 1 week to resolve the problems and to come to a compromise, otherwise you will step in to prevent a bloodbath. So we are asking you to fulfill your pledges, because we are on the brink of a civil war and a bloody, and a real bloodbath. And so it was. By July 2nd, the Morsi era was over. Was this inevitable? Egyptians like to think of their country as Ad-Dunya, the mother of the world, not a struggling economy dependent on demeaning loans from the IMF or cynical charity from countries like Qatar and others. It may be that no government could have solved the fundamental economic problems quickly, but after the 2011 revolution, any wise government could have instilled a sense of pride and possibility. What the Egyptians crave for more than anything else, more than the US dollars, is dignity, karama. And this was one of the main slogans of the January 1st revolution. And that is exactly where Mr. Morsi failed. He and his party had no plan. He offered little in the way of real solutions to the major crises that were facing Egypt, like electricity, shortage of fuel, a spiraling economy, a lack of security, rights abuse, sectarian violence, education, health, and so on. I don't have to go all over the many ills that we went through during this year. Moreover, Mr. Morsi was unpopular. He was whatever the opposite of charisma is. and never got to grips with the grinding problems of poverty and unemployment. Egyptians felt, humiliated when they saw him, Can this be the president of Egypt? It's not Timbuktu we're talking about. It's Egypt, 90 million people with 7,000 years of civilization. So it was very difficult to swallow when people say, from the beginning you were all against him. No, we're not all against him, but he didn't help much. So he and the Brotherhood perceived their victories in the elections as mandates to shape the nascent polity as they deemed fit, overlooking the need to share power, and what they sought was to institutionalize Islamist ideology and amass as much power as possible for him and his cronies. So instead of installing a government of national unity, he filled all the sensitive posts with his cronies, whether in the cabinet or the governorates or the institutions or even the judiciary that they attacked and wanted to remove half of them, all the ones who were over 60, and put instead their people. So the biggest problem was that both government and opposition lost the confidence of the majority of the people. And I'm saying again, not only the government, but also the opposition. With the result that the Muslim Brothers' majoritarian and increasingly authoritarian rule, his approach to governing was dictatorial, was pharaonic, and managed to destabilize the country rather than stabilize it. You always hear, the US administration say they want stability. So this man managed to destabilize the country because he was divisive. He divided the Egyptians against each other. And now, let us go to the sterile debate that exists in this country, which is this a coup or not a coup? It's as if we are in a 50 million question that of, what's his name, George Khalifa? Huh? Exactly the same thing. Is it a coup or not a coup? And every day we have different. How important is this? It's over. Whether it's a coup or it's not a coup, it's over. And at least the administration was wise enough not to use this word coup. Because according to US law, if it is a coup, then the great amount of assistance that the US administration gives to Egypt would be suspended. So, is this a coup or not a coup? Let me start by saying one thing. Inaction, not intervention by the army, would have been criminal. It is not intervention that is criminal, but it would have been inaction that would have been criminal. In the sense that it is not a coup in the traditional sense, and certainly does not merit a suspension of US assistance, which the law prescribes. What the army did by intervening in response to popular demand, evidenced by the 30 million Egyptians who took to the street, was to prevent a bloodbath that would have scarred Egypt for decades and would have jeopardized even Mr. Morsi's life, because he would not have been spared by the mob. So, I believe the movement was expressly the movement of empowered citizens, and this is really one of the achievements of the January 12/11 revolution, the empowerment of the people. Egyptians have never been empowered. They always had either a pharaoh or a king or a colonizer, etc. So for once, they felt the country really belonged to them and they had a say. So I believe the movement was not only the movement of empowered citizens who are writing their own history, and which was one of the greatest achievements of the 2011 revolution, but people refused the secular dictatorship of Mubarak, and now they are refusing the Islamic authoritarianism of the Brotherhood. So it has nothing to do really with religion or liberals against Islamists, etc. It is against dictatorship, it is against authoritarianism, and so on. So I would rather call it a popular impeachment. And I think this word was given to me by somebody very dear to me. And I think this describes exactly what it is, a popular impeachment, as this was probably the largest revolutionary outpouring in human history. What about the present situation? The present situation in which the military has deposed a Brotherhood president was not inevitable, and I'll tell you why. Had Morsi not done such an abysmal job as a president, the military would have lived quite happily under a constitutional system that left its power and budget largely outside the bounds of the emerging, religiously grounded political system, whose imposition of a conservative vision of society served the interests of the power elites as a whole, much as the rise of social conservatism in the United States has served its economic elite quite well. But the only way this could have succeeded would have been for Morsi's government to give enough other political forces a voice in the new system to enable them to feel that they had a stake in its success. And that did not happen. Morsi and the Brotherhood spectacularly failed in this task with their narrow focus on social issues, managerial incompetence, rising sectarian violence, and a constitution that was sure to antagonize large segments of the society, such as women, Copts, the judiciary, the intellectual and artistic community, political parties, labor syndicates, etc. In other words, all those who took to the street on June 30th. I was elected to the first Constituent Assembly, but I had to resign because 75% of the assembly was Islamists. So we wouldn't have had the chance even to put in a word. The second Constituent Assembly was deemed as illegitimate as the first one, but it remained, and it drafted the constitution that has now been suspended. Another problem was that disbanding of the lower house, which is the parliament, closed off one institutional political space for Egyptians, both to negotiate with, moderate, and even push back against the new leadership, leaving nowhere for the normal push and pull of politics to transpire. And so, the street became the only viable vehicle to assert opposition to the new order, a situation which inevitably reinforced a uniformly antagonistic relationship between the opposition and the president and his allies. Because here you hear all the time that from the beginning the people were against him, wanted to bring him down, and so on. That's not true. This only happened last November when he took upon himself constitutional powers that not even a pharaoh would have had, and immunized them, guaranteed an immunization to anything he said, no judicial overview, etc. So, of course, this made people mad, and this is when the trouble started, last December. And here I would like to recall my early days at the Kennedy School of Government and to read something from the Federalist Papers which we had to study. So let me quote Thomas Jefferson. He said, quote unquote, "Experience has shown that even under the best forms of government, those entrusted with power have in time and by slow operations perverted it into tyranny." the spirit of resistance to government is so valuable on certain occasions that I wish it to be always alive. Every generation needs a new revolution. If Morsi broke all his pledges, to start with, he said that they will not run for the presidency. The second was that they will only take 20% of the parliament. So, if Morsi broke all his pledges, and if he has broken faith even with the values of those who put him in power, then it seems that those who revolted against governmental tyranny once before now must be encouraged in their efforts to do so once again. Such a result, I believe, is fully in keeping with the ideals expressed by one of the most prominent founders of US democracy. Every democratic government gets a second chance to get it right. And remember that the United States Constitution was promulgated in 1789. The revolution was in 1776. So it is clear that what the military have just done has ended the career of an anti-democratic leader, and the military is materially supporting democratizing moves, including the stepping aside of the military and transfer to power to a civilian leadership, as you have seen in the past week. The United States should support these moves in the most concrete way possible by not interrupting aid. I was an advisor to the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, the SCAF, during a year when they took over after Mubarak's ouster. Of course, they always politely listened to us, but they never did anything that we asked them to do. So, and this is usually what the army does. They listen, they're very polite, they're very disciplined, but they don't do anything that you ask them for. And all the violations, the human rights violations, they didn't even know what it was about. But, and they made a series of blunders, as you know, during the whole year. But General Sisi was one of the 19 generals we used to meet with. He was the youngest, so he was at the end of the room, but I remember him. I don't think that he is more of a Democrat than General Tantawi. But he is younger, he is savvy, he is bright, he has been trained in the United States and not the Soviet Union, so he will be much more adept. The United States today should do what it failed to do after the 2011 revolution, and that is not only support Egypt because of peace with Israel, but this time it should prod the government and the army to push for a democratic, pluralistic, inclusive government that pursues sound economic policies. It should encourage the private sector and the businessmen who come here as they go to Mecca and who have their interests linked to American companies. The United States should encourage the private sector and the businessmen who have their interests linked to American companies to give the tone, to step in encouraging investment and substantial financial assistance in order to alleviate some of the serious social ills. And to my mind, the most serious is youth unemployment. Then we have, of course, poverty, education, health, and so on. I would like the United States to tell these businessmen sometimes that philanthropy is what made America great. And so maybe they could be inspired by that model. The United States should engage with the different parties, with the civil society. It should condemn any sectarian violence against the Christians of Egypt, a 15 million population, or any marginalization of women. Do not forget that perception is better than reality. and the perception was undeniable support to the Brotherhood, and that did not go down well with the Egyptian people. On the other hand, the United States has continuously belittled the seriousness of the secular opposition movements. Therefore, it should reach out to a broad array of Egyptians and emphasize pluralism and respect of human rights. Also, the building of democratic institutions, the drafting of a constitution conforming to broad principles to which most Egyptians can agree, and plan to resolve economic crisis rather than calling, as they do, for immediate elections. These are much more important issues. Egypt today needs their best and brightest to coalesce around principles and plans to lead the country out of its political and economic crisis. Democracy can only find root when people have a job and a voice. Therefore, solving the economic crisis and social inequality must be paramount. So, give the military and its allies time and incentive to act responsibly, to put the country back on a sustainable democratic plan. Cutting the aid now would be highly counterproductive, turning the United States into the adversary of the very actors who today have the responsibility to return Egypt to a democratic path, and that is the armed forces. What lies ahead? We are now facing the beginning of a convulsive democratic transition. The three main actors today are the armed forces, the Muslim Brothers, and the citizens who took to the streets in their million to oppose Morsi and the Muslim Brother. Every one of these actors have learned critical lessons during these 30 months, or we hope they have. And they're all very different from who they were 30 months ago. The military, for example, needed to include civilian and religious figures. As you saw the day that Morsi was ousted, it was done in front of the Sheikh al-Azhar, the highest institution, Islamic institution in the world, the Pope, the Christian Pope, Dr. al-Baradei, who represented the youth of Tamarod and the opposition, and two young people, and the Salafis who at the time refused or opposed, let's say, Morsi's government. So, this was very symbolical. This was not done in 2011, but it was done this time. I believe that the army will likely remain in control over the short term, and after the constitution, they will lurk in the winds once the constitution is amended. As for the citizenry, it has been re-energized with the knowledge that its peaceful expression of discontent on the street continues to have force and bring about historic change. Most significant are the youth of Tamarod, this fantastic, innovative movement that organized and mobilized for the 30th of June, a real manifestation of people power. And I'm in awe in front of them, I must say. If I can predict anything, I imagine that several of their members will be in leading position in not too distant a future. As for the Muslim Brothers, we are facing a war of confrontation and terror. The popular coup does not mean that the Brotherhood is out of the game. On the contrary, they are determined to engage in a struggle they see as a matter of life and death, and to use religion to incite the fervor and the anger of their supporters, particularly after the killing of 51 and 435 injured, and this of course is shocking to virtually everyone and was condemned by virtually everyone. The Muslim Brother has called for intifada and has repeatedly vowed to escalate its protest until Morsi is reinstated. Wishful thinking, I hope. The Muslim Brother is trying to exploit whatever tensions do exist within the military, and this is new, by publicly distinguishing the generals from the broader institution of the army. The fear that the Brotherhood was trying to remake Egypt in its own image was probably a more powerful energizer of the opposition than a troubled economy. People refused to have the imposition of clerics and their diktats and so on. The challenge today is to lure back some of the more moderate Muslim Brother members. I have dealt with them in the Shura Council, and I can say that there are people who are more moderate than others. There are not many, but there are some. There are some who are good, and I believe that the real challenge today is to lure them back into the new political process in order to end the profound polarization of the past year. Another focus should be on the young members of the Muslim Brothers who have lost faith in their leaders, and this is very interesting. They are expected to take over, I believe, also in the near future. The challenge today is to prevent the Muslim Brothers from turning to the bullet instead of the ballot. With the pulling out of the ultra-religious Salafi party, Al-Noor, unfortunately, which had initially joined the new governing coalition and now declared that it is pulling out of the new regime, it's as if the massacre has consolidated Egypt's Islamist party once more. Still, I think the Salafis may come out as a winner. Another target of the Muslim Brothers are the Christian Copts. Nearly 15 million of Egypt's population are Coptic Christians. Mostly, they lived relatively harmoniously in this Muslim majority country, but some Islamist extremists want to see them driven out, as they did in Iraq. And sectarian violence has risen during Morsi's rule, and Egypt witnessed some deadly attacks on Egypt's churches and Christians. The last one even attacked the venerable Coptic cathedral, which triggered the anger of millions of both Copts and Muslims. And many Egyptian Copts doubted Morsi's government commitment to protect them properly. Now that Morsi has been ousted, there is a counter-suspicion by some Muslim Brother supporters that Christians somehow had a hand in his removal. And that is extremely dangerous, because if Egypt were to fall prey to jihadist violence, Coptic Christians would find themselves easy targets. Before the June 30th upheaval, the leaders of the Muslim Brothers went to the Coptic Pope, an eminently respectable and wise man, to ask him to prevent Copts from joining the demonstrations, something he firmly refused to do, saying the church does not interfere in politics and Copts are free in their decision. What is interesting is to see the evolution of these new young Copts who have joined the revolution, who are in the forefront now as they were in the 2011, whereas before they were insulated behind the church premises and refused any participation. Having said that, I believe the biggest challenge lies with the secular and civic political forces who need to help the government establish a political process that is popular, participatory, and legitimate. To do so, and as preliminary recommendations, they need: 1, to stop any further incitement or demonization of the Muslim Brother, and strive towards reconciliation instead. After all, they have both worked together to bring down the old Mubarak regime, the old Mubarak dictatorship, and they should find a way to coexist in a new and reconciled Egypt. Number two, the military, as we all know, has no particular interest in democracy. It falls upon secular and civic political parties, not the military, to help define a democratic and pluralistic Egypt. This requires unifying around one leadership and one program as to how to direct the transitional period and implement the agreed upon roadmap. At the end of the day, it is they who must define the limits of the military's role in a new constitution. Three, the opposition and the civic forces need to guarantee that the transitional period towards a restoration of the civic order is as short as possible. To conclude, the ongoing political upheaval has transcended Morsi and the presidency. It is now a struggle over the soul of Egypt, as I said a year ago, but also for Egypt's identity and the unity of the country. The only force that matters is the will of the citizens, and Egyptians will not give up on their objectives: constitutionalism, citizenship, and sovereignty. Egypt's democratic revolution still holds the potential for shifting the Arab world decisively in the direction of liberty, accountable government, and promotion of universal human rights. If it does, it will be the first modern Arab country resulting from the will of its citizens. Thank you for your attention.
Well, I think once again we've heard a very powerful presentation by Dr. Makram-Ebeid. We're looking forward to a question and answer period. She has raised many very penetrating issues. Let me start with a question for you, though, because you've given some very good advice as to what the United States should do. You've given good advice to what the army and the opposition should do. But democracy is a ground game as well. The youthful people of Tamarud have been able to mobilize on their computers, sitting in coffee shops behind their computers, 22 million signatures on a petition. But a lot of democracy is built by getting out into the villages, getting into the streets of the urban areas, knocking on doors, meeting with people, building a party from the ground up. And I'm wondering if you see this kind of activity going as we approach another very important election in the next several months, the kind of organization that unfortunately did not happen in this last round. What are your views on that?
Yeah, right. This is the main challenge because, as you said, most of the people who were in Tahrir thought it was the best thing to do was to be on the talk shows and not to do anything else. So everybody became a prima donna, everybody became an expert, and there was nobody left to run for elections. So I think that today the young people have the young people are not the same young people, by the way. Some of them are from 2011, but most of them are even younger. And I believe they see things more, they're more open, and, you know, to get 22 signatures is not through the network. They went round, they did do some legwork, they did do, I hope that this could be translated into a grassroots organization. That's what I hope. That's what I hope, that they can have a party. I don't want them to join all parties. They can choose somebody among them, and I'm sure some young leaders will appear in the coming months. I have nothing against elderly people, but really we want to see some new fresh blood. I want the young to identify, to be able to identify. They cannot identify with the figures that we see every day. They happen to be the same ones.
Start taking the questions from the back. Stanley?
I'm Stanley Kober. On your quotation from Jefferson, every generation needs a new revolution. Looking at the Jefferson Encyclopedia, it's apparently a misquotation from a letter of 1787 when he was ambassador to Paris. God forbid we should ever be 20 years without such a rebellion. He's referring to a rebellion in Massachusetts. But he continues, and this is the central sentence from the letter: the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. We had shooting in Egypt a few days ago. We are seeing civil war in Syria. Is that Egypt's future, if you're going to quote from that letter from Jefferson?
No, I didn't quote everything. I quoted what I wanted. And what I wanted was not that. I didn't talk about blood at all. But I talked about the importance of resisting tyranny. This was the main thing that I took from Thomas Jefferson. So, no, I don't think that we will sink, hopefully, into what Syria is like, because Syria is finished. It's chaos. There is no state. There's nothing. Don't forget, Egypt has the most influential army in the region, number one. It is culturally the most influential country. Geostrategically, it's the most important for different countries' interests. And secondly, I don't think that we will, the terrorists, or whoever you want to call them, they are a minority in Egypt. Don't forget, we are 90 million, in case you forget. Every 10 months we have a new million. This is not an advantage, but this is it. This is the truth. So you cannot compare, really. And hopefully, we will not get to that. We will have violence, definitely. There will be blood in the street, I'm sure. But the Egyptians have seen worse crises. You know, in '97, there was a whole massacre in Luxor. And they were able to overcome it. They were able to get back the tourism. They were able to instill confidence in the tourism to come, and so on. The year before the revolution, the touristic industry brought in $11 billion to the Egyptian treasury. So I think it's going to be a turbulent times. It's going to be full of obstructions, if you want. But at the end of the day, I think the Egyptians will overcome.
Thank you so much for such an interesting talk and for mentioning and praising Tamarud, which you may have noticed from reading the American media is practically not mentioned at all.
They don't understand the word.
Oh, well, I actually heard of a major policy expert who will go unnamed on the morning of June 30th. He did not know what the word was. Mona El-Tahawi happened to be on the same panel, and she said it meant rebel, and he said, well, something named rebel is never going to go anywhere, on the morning of June 30th. So I think there's a profound misunderstanding of what is going on in the policy community here, missing the importance of Tamarud, missing the ongoing revolution, and relating then almost entirely, and this is what we read today, through the military, that it is in fact Secretary Hagel who's relating to Egypt of all American officials. So your message is very needed. But having said that, I confess I'm very confused about what's going on right now.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, so my question is, I hear from people in Egypt that, oh, it's just fine that the military's in charge, it's just fine, don't worry about it, just propaganda from CNN that you're worried about. But what role is Tamarud having now? And it looks like the military is just running everything. So how's that being divided?
No, the military are not running everything openly, but obviously they are there. And for the time being, they will continue, as I said, to be in charge, but they will not govern. That I'm sure of, having been with them for a whole year. I know how reluctant they are, first of all, to take over. Second, to go through an experience which was a very miserable experience. They failed, people hated them, and so on. They don't want to go through that. This time, they've really felt compelled. Of course, they have interests that they want to keep, if you want. I mean, they're not angels. They're far from being angels. But the Tamarud people are there. I mean, just before I came, I was on a TV panel, and this young Mahmoud Badr was there speaking. So they are there. We don't feel them very much as we felt them on the 30th of June, but I'm sure that they are the ones who are continuing in the squares. And as I said, I do hope that they will do some, grassroots organizations, that they will form a political party, that they will just not be people in the street.
Cynthia, let me draw your attention to the MAI website, which has a video of one of the leaders explaining how they organized the movement, and we have a very good article on the movement as well, mai.edu. Next question, right there, thank you.
How great would you say the divide is between people in the cities and people in more rural areas in terms of level of engagement and what their priorities are, what they want from their government? And in light of that, how can both rural and urban citizens be brought together into the discussion?
Rural. No, their last word was what? How can what?
How can rural and urban citizens be brought together into the discussion?
Funnily enough, they were brought together in Tahrir for the first time, much more than in 2011. The rurals, of course, were the ones who were the most supportive of the Muslim Brothers, because it had an emotional message, it's religion, you will go to heaven, and so on. These are the people of Allah. Plus the fact that they gave them sugar and rice and whatever, so they could guarantee their support in elections. But strangely enough, these people now, because one thing that happened in Egypt, which is quite interesting, is the politicization of the Egyptian people at all levels. No one was interested in politics before. It's not like Lebanon, where you breathe politics. No. There, no one spoke about politics. You never went into a salon where they spoke politics. Now, in the street, people stop you to ask you, what is your opinion? Everyone is interested, including the people in the rural areas. Although they are illiterate, although they are poor, but they watch television, and most of them have children who have gone to school and who are wizards at the new technology, and they tell them. I have my baweb. I don't think you have bawebs here, so I don't know what the word is. Porter. Doorman. He's not a doorman, but anyway, a baweb. He's a baweb. He's a Nubian baweb. And he comes and tells me, when is Morsi leaving? I said, what's it to you? He said, no. I heard he remarried. I said, what's it to you? And how do you know these things? He said, I saw it on the net. Yeah. He's illiterate. He's never seen, I'm sure, a thing. But I saw his son's CV because he asked me to get him a job. I was fascinated with the amount of qualifications that he had. So this is what you get today, a discrepancy with the older generation, but not with the newer, whether they're rural or not. And so this is the hope for the future. Second, if you heard the term, the people of the Kanaba, it means those who don't move, who are not moved. They came out. They even put a Kanaba sometimes in front of their house to show that they are the people and they are there. Now, I am with you. They don't care about who rules them, or about democracy, or about, they want to have a better life. They want to know that their children will get a job, that there is hope at the end of the tunnel, that all the things that they told them in 2011 will be realized. Nothing was realized. Their life was worse, and they have less money to buy things because it is spiraling up, the rise of prices and so on. So these people are angry and frustrated, and they vented it this time.
Hi, Dr. Mona. My name is Mukhtar. I had two quick questions for you. The first, if you had any comments about the constitutional amending process and whether or not you believe, you yourself, there are certain articles that should be focused on heavily in this process, and also about the roadmap and the timetable for parliamentary elections, whether or not you see these are feasible. The way that it's looking now, it should be late January, early February by the timetable they have set up in this constitutional declaration, and whether or not you think there are certain parties that are better poised to make certain gains, or whether or not you believe there should be a collective kind of revolutionary ticket for all these parties to move forward in the parliamentary elections.
What's a revolutionary ticket? Apart from Tamarud.
People that work together to make what happened last week happen.
Well, part of it was the National Salvation Front, which represents not all the opposition, but a big chunk of the opposition. The Constitution. I've read the 33 articles. I have reservations on many articles that are there, and particularly the one about Sharia, because it is not as we had asked for it. We had asked that Sharia should be based on the principles of Sharia, not the judgments of Sharia, not the ahkam. So this is what they have now, and I'm sure it's going to provoke a big debate. And there are many other articles that the intellectual community is not happy with. The civil liberties are not really guaranteed as we would have thought. Anyway, it needs amendment, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. Particularly that today one of the big constitutionalists, Nur Farahat, said that, you know, we can work with it and amend it. And I believe he will be one of the 10 people that will be chosen to see it. The roadmap, the elections, the people had asked that there should be a presidential election before parliamentary election. This will be subject to debate, I suppose. But the positive thing is that the president by interim, Adli Mansour, came out with something. You know, you have something that you present to the people, then debate it. And this is what I think is done now. As for the revolutionary tickets, yes, of course, that's what they should do. They should all get together, but I doubt it, you know. The prima donna string is very, very high.
Thank you for a great presentation. My name is Ala Rababa. I'm from Jordan, and I work at the Middle East Institute. I have two really quick questions. First, are you not afraid that this revolution would set a precedent that whenever there is an elected president in Egypt and people get unsatisfied with him, which happens in many democracies, people would just go into the streets hoping that the army would come and support them, and this could result in just really short-term governments? And the second thing is, you mentioned some skepticisms about the army. What do you think of its performance so far over the past few days? It seems that it has done many things that Morsi's government used to do before. They arrested lots of the leadership of the Brotherhood, but they also attacked lots of news channels and arrested many people working in the media. So would you trust the army based on that? Thank you.
Now, would the people take to the street again every time they don't like something? I don't think so. It's not a Tea Party. So, so I don't think they will do this again. And as I said, you know, most of the people took lessons from the past 30 months. I don't think this could happen again. But of course, the people will refuse any dictatorship. Today we have a past president, an ousted president, and no president. In a country where you always had one president, and he would stay eternally, either die or be assassinated, exactly. So, you know, everything is new for us. So, for the first time, we see that. That's the revolution. What did you say? Attacked? What is attacked?
Do you trust the army over the
army? No, look, I don't agree with many things that the army has done in the past days, but remember, there are conflicting reports for what has happened and the people who died. I do not think that the army would have gone in just like that if they were not tipped that there was something happening and that they were going to attack whatever, where they were, the Revolutionary Guard or something. Of course, yeah. I mean, this is the job of political parties today, to tell them not to use excessive force. This is one. Not to bring people to jail them if there is no evidence against for instance, Khairat al-Shatir, who has been taken in custody, he's the one who incited all these murders. He or the supreme guide. Anyway, I don't want to go into many names. You never know; they might come back. So, so no, I am against it. I am against this kind of no. But we are in a revolution. You must expect blunders to happen. Things will be restored to order once the civilian leadership will put down its foot and the military will take a step back. I know all these people who are in government now. I belong to the same party. They're all excellent, if it is Baradei, or if it is Ziad Bahauddin, or if it is Dr. Biblawi. So for the time being, it's a very good picture that they're giving to the Egyptians. Yeah.
Fariborz Fatemi, Oxfordshire Group. Thank you for your presentation. You've spoken a lot about the politics. Is there a roadmap for the economy when you have 2/3 of the population almost under the age of 30 and about 90% of them unemployed? How do you deal with this? Egypt has a lot of resources, corruption, all of the other things that go with it that has kind of bled everything out of the economy. Is there a roadmap for the economy in the time you spend at the Shura and the other things? Thank you.
The time I spent in the Shura, they were talking about the bonds, the sukuk, whom I'm not very familiar with, but they said that it's done in the United States where, you know, you buy shares and bonds and whatever. No, there was never some serious thought given to the economy, whereas it is the main problem, the main challenge. We're almost on the brink. The reserves have gone down by half. The foreign currency also, the pound to the dollar, all what you're saying is true. The inflation, the spiraling economy, and people have a hard time to get bread on the table. So I think that the first thing, but you know, the two people who are in charge now are top-notch economists, whether it is the Prime Minister or the Dr. Ziad Bahauddin, who is Vice Prime Minister for Economic Affairs. They have a good grasp of what is happening, and with the help, that's why today people must get their house in order. It's not the time anymore to discuss trivialities. It's the time to be behind the government in order to get a consensus which will help them to get things done. You will have austerity measures, of course you will have, but you have to explain to people. The problem is that you never treat people as if they are people. You treat them as children. So sometimes they behave as children. You have to tell them the truth. They never tell the truth. So what we need today is transparency, accountability, and to see best and to be able to hold them accountable, those who tell you things and who don't deliver or don't perform. So I think that this will be in the cards in the future, and it has to be in any case.
Thank you, Mona. Even though I consider myself as someone who knows a lot about Egypt, I always learn so much when I listen to you, so thank you for that. As someone who was just sentenced to 5 years in prison in Egypt, and yes, my name is Laila Jafar, and I work with the National Democratic Institute. You mentioned that Tamarod could develop into a party, a grassroots organization. What do you think are the chances for someone like me or an institute like NDI to be able to return to Egypt to do the work that we do to help parties and civil society?
Look, I know you, I know NDI, I've worked with them, I've defended them, I've been attacked for defending them, and I believe that this whole judgment was politicized. It was not really based on evidence. It was politicized. The whole thing was politicized. The accusation and the flying out. So I believe that the people in charge now know what NGOs are, whether it is Biblawi or it is Ziad or it is Baradei. So I think that what we need today is a real law, and NGOs must abide by the law that will be established in Egypt. That's it. Nobody should violate the law. The rule of law should apply to everyone, and I believe it's very possible that this law will be passed, amended among the laws that will be amended, and you will be able to return. You drank the waters of the Nile, so how can you not return? So, and you, Joe, huh? Yes.
Okay, we're going back.
I'm Mustansir Barma with the American Chamber of Commerce in Egypt. I just wanted to follow up on the economy question, but ask you a bit about economic assistance and your views about that. You talked about the need for some austerity and reform, but there's a lot of resistance towards the IMF loan on the ground in Egypt because of the perceived austerity that would have to happen. So what are your views on that? And also your views on money from Qatar? A lot of people here see that as a band-aid rather than anything significant, and carrying certain political influence. And now that the tables have turned over the last few days, you've seen a lot of, $12 billion of money coming from Saudi, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates. So just your views on all of that and how the international community should act responsibly in terms of supporting Egypt. Thanks.
Should imitate them. Just that. Should imitate the Gulf countries, who have realized that today is a very serious transitional period, and in particular for the economy, because the unrest can come from the youthful unemployment. And this we must put a stop to. You can't employ everybody, but at least create jobs. That's what you don't have. You don't have creation of jobs. You don't have productive industries that will be labor, labor intense instead of machineries. So No. I think that the economy is the #1 priority. But I have reservations about the IMF, because austerity measures, yes, it is the thing to do, and the book says that, and that's what they have applied. But in a polarized country, as it is, with social unrest, as there is in Egypt, I don't think that this is the best recipe. It will be the recipe for chaos, it will be the recipe for really another resistance movement, because more people will be affected by that than democracy or lack of democracy. So I think that the IMF should think twice, and I say so, I think, in one of my articles, and I said it lately in Kuwait, in a conference, that to go by the book is not, you have to adapt to each country and to see what are the social effects of austerity measures. In 1977, they did the same thing. The people were in the street for the bread riots, and it was only 1 piastre. So imagine now. So I don't think that this is the right thing to do. They should revise it. But the reluctance of the IMF was not so much the austerity measures. It was a government whom they didn't trust and whom they knew didn't have the support of the people. Now it's going to be different, with a new Minister of Finance, with a new feeling in the country. Of course, they will be worried about the security, they will be worried about the violence, but they will know that people are supporting this government. That's why I'm hoping that people will support the government to enable it to go forward.
Thank you very much. We've had an extra 15 minutes of question and answer. I know we're exhausting our honored host today. I'm afraid there are many questions that many of you want to ask. I apologize if you didn't get a chance to ask. We're going to have one last question, and it's going to be right here. Thank you.
I want to thank you for your excellent presentation this afternoon. Tom Friedman's article a couple of days ago, in his own way of deceptive objectivity, he painted a very pessimistic picture of Egypt. And this is his style. There is always poison under his sleeves. At any rate, my question to you is, are you optimistic about Egypt's future? We're all optimistic, but the question for someone who's very perceptive in Egypt, how long for when the clouds are over and from the skies of Egypt?
Thank you.
Thank you.
When the clouds do what?
The clouds part.
When the sky is clearer, you mean? Ask Tom Friedman. Should ask Tom Friedman. My feeling today is I'm relieved, but I'm very worried. So this encapsulates exactly what I feel. I can't say more than that. Because nobody can predict. You can hope. You can be wishful, but you can't predict. So it remains for me to thank everybody for being such good listeners and for shooting so many questions, because that's what I like best, is the questions.